Hello everyone, and welcome back to Short Story Thursday. Today is actually a Tuesday, August the 14th, 2018, but I'm making this extra Short Story Thursday to make up for the one that I missed a couple of weeks ago. I promised I would, and so here it is. I'm not sure exactly who coined the phrase defining moment. Howell Raines, writer and editor for the New York Times, takes credit for it in his book, The One That Got Away. I like to think of them as lightbulb moments. Those moments of epiphany when you realize something about yourself and about the world in general that is a total surprise to you. Something that moments before that you never would have imagined possible, but there it is, right in front of you. Today's story is going to be one of those moments that happened to me. Let me set the stage, if you will. This is something that actually happened to me while I was in church, and I was in my early 20s. The church was the same church that I had grown up in. It was about 500 people in regular attendance outside the metro Atlanta area, just southwest of Atlanta. And it was a very loud church, a very energetic church with very passionate members, very involved members. And while I never truly felt like I was a part of the church, like I really fit in, I did know that the church was a good church, a very life-changing church, and a very spirit-filled church. On this night, my pastor told a story to help illustrate part of his sermon. And the story went something like this. When he was a child, his grandparents owned a farm of sorts. Maybe it was a ranch, but I know it was out in the country, and they had horses because my grandfather talked about this one horse that was very docile that he liked to play with when he went to visit his grandfather. He liked to get it out, ride it a little bit, feed it, pet it, and basically just have a kiddie good time with the horse. And so this trip was no exception. He went and asked his grandfather, "Please, can I get the horse out of the barn?" And his grandfather looked at him and said, "Yes, but I have one special instruction for you. Please do not let this horse get near my fig tree." It was actually more of a bush. And so my pastor said, "Okay, that doesn't seem like a hard thing to do. We'll just go play with the horse on the other side of the yard or the field or whatever it was." And so they had a good day. They took the horse out. They did the whole ride it around for short distances, talk to it, play with it, pet it, feed it. And after a few hours, he decided that he wanted to return the horse to the barn. And so he took a route through the yard that actually went by the fig bush, but he didn't think it was going to be that big a deal. I mean, the horse had been following right along behind him when he held the leads or the bridle or whatever, and so he was going back to the barn. But right when they reached the spot next to the fig bush, the horse just stopped. And my pastor's face when he was telling the story, you could tell that when this happened to him as a child, it was just panic. He said, "I don't know why the horse stopped right there. I don't know why, if he decided he just didn't like me anymore, but he stopped right there beside the fig tree." And suddenly, and even though he hadn't done this all day, he just laid down and rolled over the fig bush. And oh my goodness, my pastor, when he was telling the story, you could hear the panic in his throat as he was talking about this, recounting the story. And it painted such a mental picture, and we've all been there. We've all been there where we were given something as a child, something we weren't supposed to break or lose, and we did our best, and some freak thing happened, and here we are, now we're in trouble. So he was able to get the horse up, got him back to the barn, went over and looked at the fig bush, and was like, "Oh, what am I going to do?" It was flattened. So that night when his grandfather came back from the fields and he had found out about it, had a chance to rest, and the next morning he was up in the bathroom with his suspenders down, he had his undershirt on and was shaving, and he had found out about it and had some time to process the knowledge. His grandmother and his parents pushed Daryl, that's my pastor's name, to the bathroom door and encouraged him to fess up to what he had done. And so he stood there as a small child looking up at his grandfather shaving. And my pastor describes his grandfather as being kind of a big, almost scary-looking old farm guy, old farmhand. And so you get this mental picture of my pastor as a child, maybe 13 years old, looking up at this big farmhand that he had just screwed up with, his grandfather. And his grandfather just turns and looks at him and says, "Daryl, you do remember I told you to keep that horse away from my fig bush?" Yes, grandfather, I'm so sorry. I tried to. I don't know why." He stopped right there. "I'm so sorry, grandfather." And his grandfather said, "Okay," and let it go. His grandfather let it go. His grandfather probably had the insight to know that this horse really liked the smell of that fig bush. That's probably why he gave him that one specific instruction, and he probably knew his grandson well enough to know that he didn't maliciously put the horse over there and try to get him to roll on it. He knew that it was a freak accident, and he had mercy and let it go. It was one of those left turns at the end of a story where it was like everything just went, At least that's the way I felt. I was so relieved for that poor 13-year-old kid, my pastor, as a kid. Just being showed mercy to. It was just such a relief for me. But the next thing my pastor said was, "Now I know some of you out there are probably disappointed that my grandfather just let it go." And I heard a light chuckling coming from all around me, all the people in this church. And I looked around, and I saw everyone looking around at each other. We're talking children, young couples, old people, middle-aged people, the entire church all looking around at each other. And they, in fact, did have disappointed looks on their face. Even this lady that everybody kind of looked up to, this lady that would do Bible studies and Sunday school sermonettes and had proven herself to be proficient in the gifts of the Spirit, even she was doing this motion like she was sharpening a razor on a razor strop, mouthing the word razor strop, and then even holding her hand back and doing this. She had a disappointed look on her face. It seemed like the consensus really was in that entire church that they wanted that story to end with my pastor as a child being taken behind a barn and beaten unjustly because of a freak accident. And they were indeed disappointed because that's not the way the story ended. It made me look at the church and realize that even though this was a good church, a spirit-filled church, a life-changing church, there was a nugget of cruelty deep in this church that the church had grown around. And my pastor understood that it was there enough to even make the comment. I'm sure some of you are probably disappointed the story ended that way. It's either that or I'm just completely socially unaware of the way the general public thinks. That is, if people in that church are any kind of example of the general public of normal people. And I actually kind of think that the truth is somewhere in between those two things. And it made me wonder then, and it still makes me wonder even now, thinking back on it, how am I going to live the rest of my life when the general public, when people in general think so differently than I do? Where a story ending with a child getting taken behind a barn and beaten with a razor strop unjustly for a freak accident would have been a good ending. How do I live in a world full of people that think that way? And so that was my light bulb moment that day. And that was one of the moments that went into my life to help to shape me as an adult and make me want to be self-employed, separated from the general public so that I can make decisions for my own good, for myself, that fit a little more to my way of thinking that apparently is very different than the way a lot of other people think. So that's it for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed this Short Story Thursday, even though it was on a Tuesday. Please don't forget to smash that like button, leave comments, leave questions, leave suggestions. I love you all very much. Please don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and ring the bell icon to start receiving notifications. I will see you all again in the next video.